Without further ado, I wanted to go ahead and introduce Phyllis and Alicia. And just for the sake of time, I've shortened both of their bios. They're both have a long list of accomplishments and things that are worthy of sharing, but hopefully some of that will come out in today's conversation. I'm actually going to hand it over to my colleague, Jenny Randall, to give their introductions.
Absolutely. So today we have Phyllis Johnson and Alicia Adams here to speak with us. Alicia Adams, originally from Connecticut, Alicia left a career as a clinical laboratory scientist in 2009 to live in California. She entered the coffee industry as a barista in Oakland 10 years ago and has since moved on to become a certified Q Arabica grader and most recently the director of coffee at Red Bay Coffee in Oakland, California. Alicia regularly judges regional, national, and international coffee competitions, and her personal missions in coffee revolve around sustainable direct trade sourcing, empowering women's groups, and finding new ways to disrupt and reform the coffee supply chain. Phyllis Johnson is the co-founder and president of BD Imports, an award-winning social enterprise focused on responsible sourcing of specialty coffees. She brings new ideas to coffee conversations around diversity and inclusion while offering her unapologetic, honest, and heartfelt perspectives based on her 20 years in the coffee industry. She is a pioneer of the Women in Coffee Empowerment movement and has written several articles highlighting inequities in the coffee trade, including her recent open letter to the U.S. coffee industry on racism. She is also the founder of the New Coffee Coalition for Racial Equity.
We're really thrilled, honored, and humbled to be an institution that's a part of this conversation on race and coffee. Over the past months and years, the challenges of racial inequity, underrepresentation, and racial injustice have really come to the forefront in the coffee sector. A lot of difficult conversations have been had, a lot of action has been taken, but there's still a lot of work to be done. So we're really honored to be a part of continuing this conversation, to raising some further insights about what we might do to build a different future for this industry. And so without further ado, I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that we can see Phyllis and Alicia. I'm going to spotlight their videos so they stay on all of our screens as they talk, and we'll get the talk started. I'd love to start off with a question about your origin story in coffee, just to get everybody a little bit more acquainted with how you found your path into coffee and what you consider to be your coffee origin. Alicia, would you like to go first?
Yeah, sure. I know I've probably told this story a bunch of times, a bunch of different ways, and it's so nice to see so many people that I know in this chat that are all from the Bay Area, and just like really excited that everybody's here to support. So if you heard this story before, it's just, this is more for the students and the people who aren't so familiar with me and this new community that's forming with this university program. So it's so exciting to just keep telling it because everybody's origin story is different. So yeah, I quit my job at a hospital working as a scientist for a couple years, and it was just kind of intense in a way that I didn't expect it to be, just fresh out of college. So I just kind of listened to what my heart and mind was telling me, and I just moved to California with no real plan. And it took me a whole year of living in the Bay Area to kind of like find a cafe job. I just poked my head into a cafe that was being built out, and they just had me come back the next day. And from there, I was working with specialty coffee. And at that point, I didn't even really know it. I didn't know what I was learning. I didn't know how it was useful yet, but I knew that I really enjoyed doing it. So, so my first cafe job was like a Blue Bottle wholesale account. Back when they had those, they don't really do wholesale anymore. And then I just kept finding different service industry jobs, restaurants, cafes. And because I had this coffee knowledge and because I knew how to dial in an espresso machine, I would, at that time, being like a early third wave barista, I guess, or, I was kind of started coffee right at that beginning third wave time. So for me, there weren't a lot of people who really engaged with coffee that way yet. A lot of people were still kind of plugging and chugging their espresso shots and just, it would come out however. So when they found somebody who knew how to clean a group head or knew how to dial in espresso or adjust the grinders or even just do the regular basic stuff that we all know how to do now, I would get hired pretty easily. And I'd have to do like, you know, a lot of other things in addition to coffee. They'd want you to do coffee. They'd want you to run food. They want you to do this and that and the other. So that was exhausting, but I still loved doing coffee. So eventually, after, I don't know, 4 or 5 years of being a barista, server, bartender, whatever, to make money, I basically decided, I found my community of people who were in my neighborhood, other baristas. I found Bay Area coffee community. And then from there, I was able to get enough courage to like apply for a Blue Bottle barista position. And even at that point, I still got turned down the first time I applied, even knowing somebody who worked there, having a referral. So I had to apply again from like being pushed by a colleague. And then I finally got a job as a barista. So I was like, man, all this work for an entry-level position. I have a medical degree. This is a little crazy, but I'm sticking with it. I'm gonna just keep pushing until I learn enough to, you know, to be able to move forward in my career. So from Blue Bottle, then I was working there for about a couple years, and I had pretty bad wrist tendonitis. So I had to figure out my exit from retail and service pretty quickly after, you know, now 6 or 7 consecutive years of being a barista. And then I was able to really use my network, use my community to find an entryway and an escape from retail to work in an importing company as a quality control specialist. And I really don't, I mean, we're going to talk about a lot more about employment and getting hired as a Black person, but I could say right now that I would not have gotten that job had I not had known somebody who really needed my help. And I had to move an hour away. I had to make all of these things happen and make a lot of sacrifices for it to happen, and really have somebody who has really had my best interest in mind to be able to get to just that point. So stayed there for a couple years, and then the company was relocating, and I didn't quite really want to move back to the East Coast yet. So as luck would have it, again, through my network of contacts, Red Bay Coffee reached out to me. So then I kind of made a smoother transition into that job. But then again, had to move again, you know, and the offer wasn't exactly what I had in mind, but I took it anyway because there was a lot of potential there. So, you know, it's kind of like that 2 steps forward, 1 step back kind of thing. Every time I go to you know, find a job, to apply for a job, to get paid what I deserve, and to also like really have to work my network to get these jobs, not necessarily like just on paper or just interviewing. It's like I have to, it takes every little bit of advantage I have to use. So it's been, you know, people look at my career and see, oh, I've done all these things, I've traveled, I've bought coffee, but what they don't see is all the times that I've been rejected, told no, taken a lesser offer, all of those things that we can probably get into a little bit later. But yeah, I am still here, and I'm so excited and honored to be even talking with Phyllis today. So
yeah, I mean, I've been in coffee. Can you hear me okay?
We can.
Yeah, I've been in coffee for 21 years. I've done a lot of stuff. I would just like to get into the questions. I like coffee. I see a lot of my friends here, and thank you, Haynes, thank you. It's an honor to be here. I did my research on Vanderbilt, and I'm so impressed. Vanderbilt was built for men, but somehow they never got around to enforcing that. And so women, they had at least one woman show up for school every year, starting in 1875, and they began in 1873. So for that, you know, I give Vanderbilt a thumbs up. I can't wait to come there. I don't think I've been on the campus of Vanderbilt. From what I read, there was, you know, Haynes, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but there was a little not quite so sure about their involvement with the slave trade and the Confederacy. But, you know, it's the South. I've graduated from universities that are knee deep in that kind of stuff. So yeah, yeah. So it's good to be here. It's good to have this conversation, and let's just talk. Let's start asking questions, and let's start talking about our life experiences.
Awesome. So for everyone that's on the call, Phyllis and Alicia and I met last week to kind of brainstorm what the priorities for this conversation were. And we came up with, well, really Phyllis and Alicia came up with a list of 4 things that they felt were really important to talk about around this topic. And those were race in hiring and employment practices, race in terms of interpreting professional qualifications, fear as a driver of racial inequity and injustice in the sector, the role that marketing and storytelling has in maintaining power where it's been for decades and centuries, or marketing and storytelling as a way to turn that on its head and create a different future. And then the last thing that we talked about was, what would it look like to build an alternative future where racial equity and racial justice are paramount? And so those are kind of some of the things that we're going to touch on in the rest of this conversation, just to give you all a heads up. And I'd love to start with this topic of how employment opportunities, hiring practices, expectations around professional qualifications reinforce racial inequity or underrepresentation among Black men, women, and non-binary individuals in the coffee sector. And also about the role of generational wealth for those coffee entrepreneurs out there who might be aspiring and trying to find their way in coffee as Black entrepreneurs. Those are 2 of the things that I'd really love to start with. So Alicia, kind of from your experiences, I'd love to, you alluded to it just a moment ago. Would you mind talking a little bit about how you see employment and hiring practices or expectations around professional qualifications creating a coffee industry wherein Black individuals are underrepresented as coffee professionals?
Sure, yeah. I think that like the biggest, like the hardest thing for me as a Black coffee professional is just, well, it's a lot of things, but if I had to distill it down to one thing, I'd probably be somewhere in the realm of being underestimated quite often, and just like not taken 100% seriously. And this is coming from me, who's like, I've got the network, I have mentors, I have, you know, a certain amount of privilege that I've developed in this industry over a while. I have a lot of things that your average Black person in coffee does not have. Like, I understand that. And yet, every time I go to apply for a job, it just feels like I'm hearing the same things, I'm jumping through the same hoops, all to land in the same position. And if I'm really being honest about who really offers me opportunities, it's not white men and it's rarely white women. So it just doesn't happen organically as it should. There's a lot of friction that I face all the time, but that's not to dishearten anybody or discourage anybody from being in this industry, because it's always in flux. There's a lot of risk. There's a lot of money involved. There's product changing hands. So there's going to be a certain amount of stress if you decide you want to be in the coffee industry. And then on top of that, if you are a Black person or a Black woman or a person of color, there's just going to be a whole other layer of stress that you probably aren't going to necessarily be able to pinpoint all the time, but you are going to see yourself move probably a little bit slower through your career than some of your white coworkers. And, you know, I've come to kind of accept that fact. And there, in addition to all the people who aren't giving me opportunities, there are some people who do. So, you know, you have to focus on and build relationships with the people who understand or want to extend a hand so that you can help you get to that next step and next point in your career. But I always run into this, like, I've heard overqualified, underqualified, too indie, to not enough, too big volume, too small volume. You know, like, there's no end to what somebody might say to me that would be somewhat discouraging. So I always have to say like, well, you know, like I've done this, this, and this. I've worked with large inventories. I've worked with small inventories. I've trained baristas. I closed business deals. I can do all of that stuff on paper, yet somehow there is still like a margin that I'm in where it's like, if I appear too impressive, then someone might be intimidated by that and not want to hire me. And if I have maybe one thing that is like minor in most cases and most hiring scenarios for like, you know, what someone might learn on the job, which in coffee you're learning, I would say about 75% of the job you learn on the job. Like, I mean, yes, it's helpful that I have the degree that I have, but most people don't even have a lab degree, yet they're still working in labs. So I have a lab degree and I had to like fight tooth and nail to get into a lab, or even just be able to like, you know, someone to feel secure that I, a Black woman, can do lab work. So, you know, and I'm just always like, you know, I used to work in high stress, life or death situations in a hospital. So like coffee to me is, as far as stress level goes, quite significantly less than that. But like the challenging part is it's just getting grouped into people of color, and like people are like trying to be more sustainable and trying to release these statistics. But when you just say POC, you are inadvertently or on purpose just ignoring the fact or turning a blind eye to the fact that Black people are probably struggling the most in this industry. Not to, you know, weight one over the other, but if I think about how many Black people and my colleagues were laid off, including myself, for COVID versus how many of my white colleagues were laid off, it's just is very disproportionate. So, you know, it's hard to get into the industry, it's hard to stay in the industry, and it's just a constant cycle. Like I said, you might make some progress, but it's hard to maintain, and it's hard to have job security at the end of the day. So, you know, I think that like companies really need to not just look at people of color as a whole, but say like, how many Black people do we actually have? Like, how many Black people do we have in management positions? And I know that these conversations are just starting to happen now, and a lot of people are posting about where they're donating money and what organizations and Black Lives Matter and all that. But like, I can say as of being laid off since May, and, you know, applying for a couple jobs and going through some lengthy interview processes, that like, it's the same. So yes, like the Black people who are on this call understand really what performative really feels like and looks like, because we hear the same things from all the different employers who, you know, are struggling to figure out what to do next to help, or what to do to change their hiring practices. But currently, I would just say that it's just not enough. Like, you know, you can't post about it. You have to actually say the next person we hire is going to be a Black person, period.
Right.
There's plenty of them unemployed. So, you know what I mean? And it's almost unfair now, to the point that we all have to compete against each other. So, you know, but focusing on the positive, like just saying POC is not enough. Just saying, you know, well, we have this, you know, this is what our diversity looks like. But it's like, if you really want to get to the root of the problem, just hire more Black people, change your company policies, you know, and don't be afraid of who that's going to upset. Because if you're not upsetting anybody, you're not doing anything that's going to spark any kind of change, or like Phyllis sometimes call a ripple effect. If you're not making anybody uncomfortable for something so simple and basic, and it's just not going to
you know, with that point, you know, Alicia is talking about the here and now. She's marred down in the here and now. We all are. And for me, you know, I've been in coffee for a while, and I came to coffee as an entrepreneur. So my journey has been a little bit different, but the struggle has really been the same. You know, my business has done well at times, it's shrank. If I compare my business to other businesses that started when I started, I learned not to compare. I guess I'll say that. I learned not to compare. I also learned that I was kind of on a different sort of pathway, that how I measured success was different. It's not the same as everyone's success. And I found a lot of support in helping other people because I understood the struggle. But I do want to talk a little bit about generational wealth. Generational wealth, when I first started in coffee, I remember going out to visit coffee roasters, and we'd be sitting at the cupping table and they'd say, well, you know, my grandpa bought coffee from our current supplier's grandpa. And I'm like, well, you know, I'm sorry, I just started this thing. And so even if it's not generational wealth in coffee, because you're Black, oftentimes you're gonna have less wealth to invest in coffee, right? So even if it's not a 5-generation coffee company family, it's your family has been generating wealth enough for you to do something. And so whenever I see a Black person in America in coffee, I know that it's by choice. And I know that it's by effort, by strong effort, that individual made a conscious choice to research, understand coffee, and to try to have a place in the industry. And their voice is so incredible. Alicia and I, when we met, we share both being scientists, so I have a lot of affinity for a woman who studied science. And you know, it pains me to hear of the struggle of Black people in coffee. It literally does. I think I reached out to a few folks and I said, you know, how's this person doing? How's that person doing? And I started calling, texting them. I'm on routine calls and texts with some Black coffee professionals. They are passionate. They have so much to give, but they lack opportunity. And it's just, I see the COVID drifting us farther away from building a coalition or a force of Blackness that's so needed in this industry. And so I feel like if there's more I can do other than just stay in touch with them. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. But I feel a responsibility. And I wish that everybody felt a responsibility in this industry to make sure that they have a staying power.
Yeah, and sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, I'm done.
I was just going to ask you, are there specific kind of gatekeepers that you can point to that really limit opportunities for Black people in coffee? For example, is it not seeing yourself in coffee shops? Like if you don't see yourself in a space, sometimes that doesn't feel comfortable to even consider it as a professional pursuit. Is it, you know, is the main thing, these employment practices, are there specific things that you can point to as critically reinforcing this?
Well, I'll start with that. You know, I've been in rooms with friends, coffee friends, and they've been saying, well, you know, my son's gonna head up to New York this summer and spend the time at, you know, John's trading company and learn the trade before, you know, they come. And as exciting as that sounds, it's still very closed, you know, because that opportunity is only afforded to people who understand how it works. So it is a closed society. Black people, I say Black people go to coffee. Black people die in retail at coffee. And, you know, I love retail, but it's the harshest environment and there's not always promotions. So they come into retail and there's nothing else. Alicia was very fortunate to be able to move beyond retail. And it's not that they can't see what's beyond retail. They have interactions, I'm certain, but the opportunities are limited beyond retail. You know, I did see my buddy Felton on the call. I don't want to call him out. He's a guy that I admire who's been in coffee for a while, and he's beyond retail. So, and as I said, there is nothing wrong with retail, but it's a $225 billion industry in the US. And so there are opportunities. There's opportunities to use talents. So Alicia kind of said things in a different way. I know that I had written that I felt that if more Black and brown people were in coffee, that they could, they would have more empathy. They would view the farmer, they would understand the connections. I definitely know that I do. You know, I have a stalk of cotton on my desk over there because I grew up working in cotton. So I have empathy for the coffee farmer. Alicia put it kind of a different way, and she put a different twist on it. I'll let you share, because your angle was different than mine. So instead of me expressing empathy, I'll let you take it from there.
Yeah, I think for me, like, you know, I've had the opportunity to travel a bit and go to, you know, different countries and experience what it's like going to origin. And I don't have a farming background. I didn't, you know, my family's from the South, but like I grew up in the Northeast, so I don't like claim those Georgia roots like that. But basically, like going to origin as a person of color or as a Black person, it's like you're going to, as soon as you get there, you're going to make that connection, saying like the empathy of the people who, I think Phyllis, you've mentioned this before, it's like any of us could have ended up anywhere. And we are all connected through this coffee, through slavery, through colonization. And when you meet someone who has, you know, we do have similar backgrounds to people who are at origin farming coffee. And it's kind of an innate connection that you have, more so than like, oh, I just, you know, want to buy the best coffee and I want to, you know, do the best work and be sustainable. It's beyond that. It's like, it's a human connection, and I do think that people, because the coffee industry, especially the supply chain, has been so segregated for so long. When you meet somebody and you've come all the way through that segregation to see somebody on the other end that looks like you, who is struggling in some of the same ways and the different ways, then you just feel like, you know, when you go back to your first world country, you just feel like, well, I'm not going to get a good night's sleep if I know that I'm not doing everything that I can, because to me, this looks like slavery. So I'm not going to rest. Because there's a lot of people who are still fighting that fight. And just because I ended up in these states, however they may be right now, I have a little bit more leverage, and I have a little bit more mobility throughout my career to be able to make greater impact. So I don't think that people who are inheriting this, who are on maybe the other side of colonization, really experienced that empathy the same way. Not to say that empathy is impossible, but it's definitely not happening to the same degree. And I just think that when you have people who feel so strongly, and you've touched on all these passionate coffee professionals, through passion, there breeds like creativity, it breeds innovation, and it breeds like forward thinking, where there's a lot of people who are twice my age who are really okay with doing things the same way that their predecessors have done it. And although we see tons of activity on the retail level, and you know, so many people trying to raise up the communities through, you know, providing monetary things, and you know, there's a lot of nonprofits that are starting to get people coffee gear so that they can have access just to learn, but that's just not enough, because that is still going to potentially keep a lot of Black professionals in retail and not get them into cupping labs, not necessarily get them learning the business, the trade, where the bulk of the coffee industry happens, like, is not specialty. Sorry to break it to you guys, like, specialty is like half of the cherry on top, and the rest of the industry is the rest of the industry. So you know, if you're not somewhat unsettled by what's going on in the rest of the industry, then you probably should just take another look at what's happening. But I think Black people kind of get that a little bit faster because we've experienced that a little bit or much more. So, and also not to like disregard brown folks and, you know, people living in Central South America, but it is much different there as far as like family smallholders and keeping things within the family and not, you know, there's still tons of struggle and tons of oppression that's still happening. And, but we have to really look at like the root and how this whole thing started and then work from there and build inclusivity. But like the root of the problem is that, you know, we have to like rehumanize this whole process that was once just trade and slavery. So, so yeah, I think there is, I think someone like me who's okay with speaking their mind and educated and experienced can pose a threat to a lot of systems that have been functioning pretty the way that they have been. So yeah, it's not.
And that's I'm sorry, that's a really good point to talk about this fear that drives the reproduction and the holding in place of racial injustice, racial inequity. So I'm wondering if you all could talk a little bit about, you know, as a white person, there have been times in my life where I have been scared of saying the wrong thing about race, or, you know, I've had friends who have chosen to remain silent because they don't want to say the wrong thing, or, you know, there are circumstances where there's a fear or a refusal of acknowledging connections to dark past, for example, in coffee. What role do you all think that those types of fear play in reinforcing histories of racism and racial inequity in the coffee sector? Phyllis, I know that you think about this a lot, and Alicia, you just alluded to it quite a bit. Would you mind talking about that a little bit?
Yeah, you know, the history of coffee is so important. When I came to coffee, it was the history that held my attention, but that history wasn't easy to get to. You know, and I know this is a university. Most of the history books I've read about coffee, they've been written by university professors. I would wonder, Haynes, with this Equity Lab, if you could do some research, how many history books have been written by about coffee by non-white men? I'm not jumping on you, white men. You know, I'm not. I'm just saying that there is a different perspective based on who's writing the story, right? And my favorite coffee history book. You open the cover, there's a picture of a sketch from a French artist of Kaldi. Kaldi, the goat herder from Ethiopia, looks more French than Ethiopian, right? That was when I came to coffee and I opened up the history books. That's what I saw. That's what greeted me. Of course, I know Ethiopia is on the continent of Africa, but my mind didn't start saying, this guy is an Ethiopian. Something just said, okay, this is how coffee began. That same history book, if I turn the pages, it says, Haiti recovered from the long ago slave insurrection that had ruined its coffee industry, providing 48 million pounds of coffee to the US, and it goes on from there. If a person who had different roots, who had a different path, was telling that story, how can you say the coffee industry was ruined? You know, people's lives were ruined. So I think the history books need to be written with a bit more sensitivity and understanding to the enslavement of the people that they themselves, I know the books are about coffee, I get that, but the people are important. And as the person who is a descendant of slaves, reading those types of things washes completely over the people. I'll make another point. I was talking to a good friend of mine from Brazil, and I said, yeah, I'm really kind of looking at this thing about the erasure of Black people in coffee. She's like, erasure, Phyllis, what does that mean? I'm like, the erasure. And she said, Phyllis, you can't erase something that was never written. And I thought, you're right. That's the wrong word. You're right. It's never been written. So, there's a lot. I love history. Euchre's, the first coffee shops, the first coffee houses that came to the US in the mid 1700s had a platform in the front where it says Negro, children, men, and women were sold at that platform. The way I see it, and people would go into the coffee house, drink, eat, live out their lives, do whatever they needed to do. But we're still ignoring this. We are still ignoring the fact that something is going on that's not right. And we're just gonna get in here and we're gonna find out the altitude. We're gonna, get this latte or whatever and go on about our business. I'm just saying, it's been going on since the start, since the jump, as my daughter would say. So it's time. It really is time that we look at the platform. We say there are people. I'm sorry, I don't mean to get so excited about this, but
too. I'm like,
yeah, that's kind of like how I feel about it. I mean, I know I got my notes and stuff, and I'm going to stick to them, but this storytelling thing, this thing about history, I don't necessarily want to write it, but those of you out there who are listening, who have book deals, who have wrote a book, who are thinking about a book, ask a Black person in coffee to help you.
yeah.
Call me, I'll give you some context, because the perspective need to be heard. It needs to be said in a way that's so sensitive. Can you imagine if I had opened up a history book, Alicia, with a perspective of a Black person when I came to coffee? Can you imagine if that was?
It's hard because when I started in coffee, I didn't see any Black people, and now I'm like, oh my gosh, there's all these younger Black coffee professionals, and it just makes me want to do something even more because I see them, they're working so hard, maybe even harder than I ever did, because like I felt like the only one 10 years ago, but yeah, I'm pretty exhausted with the romanticism that is kind of painting this lens of what coffee is and these farms. And yeah, the backdrop is beautiful, but what they're not showing is the poverty. What they're not showing is the indentured servitude. And it's just, there's just so, like, you can laser focus in on a beautiful microclimate at high elevation. Like, that's one very small aspect. And I just think we need to see, not necessarily see more of what's going on, but I think we just need to like see the situation a little bit more, a much more broader spectrum, because focusing in on, one micro lot farm that produces 20 bags is great to showcase something really special, but it really is a half a drop in the bucket when we're talking about reforming the supply chain and what the future of coffee might look like, or what it currently looks like. I get it can be very stressful thinking about what the future of coffee looks like, because we're all just trying to get through this month maybe, or this week or whatever, so coffee is always going to be a long-term planning. So if people are trying to fix race issues in coffee, like, you have to change some major structural things within your company that probably won't see any real effect maybe 5-10 years down the road. And coffee does move fast, but short-term efforts aren't going to get us anywhere. And I do see a lot of short-term efforts, especially this year. So yeah, so I mean, I'm still out here looking for work and things like that, and have been going through it. And I'm lucky enough to be able to take some consulting work like this and do, just with my credentials, but not everybody is able to do that. And a lot of people are just forced back into retail during pandemic times. So that's the reality of where we're at. So if we're not protecting our most vulnerable, then we're going to lose them. And I think, diversity in coffee is such a beautiful thing, and coffee is already a beautiful thing, and it's a struggle. So, it can be like the most beautiful if you believe in that type of struggle, or if you experience that type of struggle, which I know all people of color definitely know what I'm talking about. So, it's just a huge oversight to stop there. And I do feel like a lot of companies really need to stop being so performative once again, and really change. Like if we can change, workplace discrimination, we can make laws around workplace discrimination and say that we're upholding them. We can take it a step further, and really kind of, I think things just need to be turned on their head. I really think so. And I think I've mentioned before too, there's just a lot of people that are very complicit in this bias that's happening. And I have a lot of friends who still have their jobs, and they vent to me, and I'm not about to call people out today or ever, but I just know, people out there who may be employers, if you have people of color who aren't coming to you, it doesn't mean that they're not experiencing bias and racial discrimination on a daily basis. It just means that they probably don't want to quit their job in the middle of a pandemic, because they know that re-entry is even more difficult for them. So take that as you will, but I do know that a lot of my friends are currently struggling with the same issues at companies who are still being performative and not really addressing internally what bias can look like and what racial insensitivity can look like. And they'd rather take the easy way out and just donate money to a nonprofit. And that isn't, yeah, they should still be doing that, but that's not going to help the employees that they house. So yeah, I think we just all need to be a little bit more candid when we talk about race, and really say, like, and stop blending it all together into one big topic, and really say, like, don't be afraid to say, we don't have any Black people working at this part of our company. Let's go find some, or let's hire some, or, how is that all of a sudden, unfair? That's what I'm wondering. I don't know. I guess I shouldn't be asking the questions.
Yeah, the word, yeah, just by saying, Black woman, white man, white woman, it
makes people.
I've gotten very comfortable saying it. I say it with no emotion. I say it as a
fact, yeah.
And it is, it is construct. I get that. We constructed this, but yeah, I hear what you're saying. Go ahead, Haynes.
So
I don't know. I think we got off topic.
We didn't at all. This is all very related to everything that we were ever going to talk about.
Okay, great.
We could continue talking about this forever. I could keep asking you all questions forever, but I'm wondering if we want to open it up to the audience for a couple of questions.
Well, I did want to talk about one more brief thing, and that had to do with the future.
Yes,
how do we view the future? When I think about the future of coffee, I see the future in looking back. And that's what's so incredible about it. Because we don't look back, we don't envision a future. As a result of the open letter, I started the Coffee Coalition for Racial Equity with 15 other coffee professionals. It is the industry, it is our organization, and we hope to bring about greater diversity in the industry. But I want to talk briefly about the fact that there's 44 million Black people that live in America. If Black people were a country, we would be number 33 based on size. We would be behind Argentina and right before Algeria. 41% of Black people, African Americans, took coffee in past day coffee data based on the national coffee data trends. That's off par with other ethnicities that are around 64%, 5%. So with that 17% spread, what is that? What, 8 million, 10 million people? I don't know. How much is that in revenue? How much is that in entrepreneurship? How much is that into farmers? It's huge. So there's a reason. It's not just a business case to include Black people in coffee, because it is, but we're just going to get more creativity, more opportunity. We don't need a big, marketing blips by, a major brand to get Black people drinking more coffee for the month of February. We need sustained businesses, opportunities, consumers, enrichment and lives, all the way back to the farmer. Okay, I'm going to let you go and go to the questions. I think it's time.
I mean, I love talking about alternative futures, so we can just keep going.
No, we'll take questions. I'm sure we got some. She needs to do her job.
So Jennifer asked, Alicia, you mentioned that if you don't have Black people in a certain part of your company, go find some. Can you expand on that a bit? Are there specific ways you find are most welcoming way to recruit people? Like what does recruitment look like from your point of view?
Yeah, I mean, well, I guess now we're not exactly meeting people in cafes and shaking hands anymore, but the coffee community, part of what I mean drew me to coffee in the first place was the community, and the community kept me there. So if you do even a little bit of research, as far as like different talks, like there's all the Black coffee professionals I know have done at least one public speaking opportunity or aspiring to do that or are competitive. So, there have been SCA talks around Black coffee. There's blogs. There's the Black coffee professionals are very active in their communities, and they, they're not that far out of reach. And as far as like how I've gotten a lot of my success in my career have been people directly reaching out to me. So that when I say go find some, like there was somebody there, on the very few occasions someone was looking specifically for me. And I consider myself very lucky that that's happened, and it just happens not often enough, because there's a lot of people like me who have just as good palates as I do, who have maybe even a bigger heart around coffee because they've been in it less time and are less, challenged about their ideas about it, who are just really passionate and ready to go. So, I guess if we are saying that like all of the hiring practices are kind of making coffee inaccessible to Black people, that means that you have to go above and beyond to make it more accessible, whether that means holding a job fair and saying, Black and POC people encouraged to apply, or you could just say Black coffee professionals strongly encourage. The word, if one Black coffee professional sees it, they all see it. Like we all know each other, we're all spread out. So we don't have like, there's no pocket of Black coffee professionals. We are far and few between, but there's more of us coming. So I think if you just do a little bit of research with some of, or, you can always ask me if you need somebody, we're all friendly people. If you say, hey, I'm looking to hire a Black coffee professional, like the amount of people that would jump at that opportunity would probably overwhelm you. So yeah, if you put yourself out there and really do the little bit of digging that it would take, you definitely would come in contact with some, and a lot of them are still looking for jobs. So so yeah, I do think it takes a little bit of a little bit more intention to find them.
Thanks, Alicia. And Karina, you have your hand raised. Would you like to unmute yourself and ask away?
Yes. First of all, thank you so much for having this event. I am a PhD student in sociology at USC in Southern California, and I research Latinx-owned coffee shops here in LA. And one of the things that I'm grappling with in my research, and I'd like your perspective on this, is do Black and Latinx and basically non-white coffee shop owners and their businesses have, like, should they have a political mission to their coffee shops? And I know you talked about, or both of you talked about, like, a different business models with more empathy and collaborating with the farmers themselves. But I'm wondering more about the implications of having a business, thinking about neighborhood change and potentially gentrification, and the coffee shop being a symbol of gentrification traditionally, and how Black coffee shop owners, coffee shop professionals, maybe doing things differently, or how may the implications of neighborhood change
I probably could
go out
answer that
differently for, yeah.
at least on some point, since I used to work for a Black-owned coffee roastery. And as far as the gentrification bit, if you're a person of color and you're already thinking about this, you're already on the right track, because a lot of shop owners just open up because of the space and the rent. So if you're thinking about how to be sensitive to the community that you want to enter in, then you're probably going to lead your business in the right way. However, after working at Red Bay, we were in a Black and Latinx community, and the community embraced the coffee. So, and it was a roastery, so it takes up a little bit more space, and it definitely is in like a district where there's a lot of makers. So I think for a coffee shop, that is essentially, you're not roasting, I think. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. The folks I'm talking
So
about.
yeah, so I mean, I think it's really about who you hire, what kind of events you host. Coffee definitely is one of those meeting places for people. How you engage with the community, like, are you engaging with, I mean, it's a little different now because people aren't engaging the same way. Like, are you engaging with the local teachers in the community? Are you engaging with the local restaurants in the community? Are you holding events with people in your community? And I think that is the best way to avoid gentrification and to promote inclusivity, and obviously hiring diversely. And as far as the mission, I mean, if you're going to open a business and take responsibility over any group of people, like, you should probably have one. And what that is just, it's different for everybody. So if your mission is to support Latinx community, then that's your mission. But it really depends on what you would like, what kind of impact you would like to make in the community.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I think that it's an extra burden, but it's a burden that, and when I say burden, I don't mean it in the sense of a burden, because there's joy in building and helping a community and giving back. There's a lot of fulfillment in that, but it's hard, and you have to do it while trying to run a business. And Black and Latinx businesses may suffer more because they don't have some of the same opportunities. So I think everyone should do it. I don't think it should be, I don't think necessarily, I don't know if that was the question per se, but I think it should be a way of business for everyone.
Thank you so much.
So one final question, just to kind of respect everyone's time and getting back to this, what does a different future look like and how do we get there? Phyllis, there's the work that you're doing with CCRE. Alicia, you're invested in all sorts of advocacy on this topic. Are there any organizations or businesses that you could point to that you feel like are making a really deep and meaningful contribution to building a more racially equitable and inclusive coffee sector? Like, are there any standout examples that you'd like to share with people?
I'm sure there's a lot of opportunity. There are a lot of activities happening, and they've been happening prior to the George Floyd and the civil racial unrest in the US. There's been more attention since then, obviously, but I think we have a long way to go. I think we have a very long way to go. We just, and that's why, we are working towards building a coalition of folks that, who aren't afraid to say some of the things, you know, that Alicia was saying, to just say there's an unbalance here that must be fixed. And how do we fix it? Do we fix it by looking at historically Black colleges and universities? What are the challenges there? You know, how do we do it with education? And, you know, we're not so, you can't educate someone out of oppression and racist acts. You can't, you know, there's so much opportunity. Best case examples, you know, I don't think we have it yet. I think it's coming. It's coming. And I'm really excited about the Coffee Coalition for Racial Equity. I think some of our board members are on the call. It gives me joy just to look at them. And Alicia was one of the first people I called, and she was like, yeah, I'm down, whatever you're gonna do. But, you know, just to look at the board, just, you know, when they're on my screen, when I see a picture, they look like and they represent what the world should look like when everyone has a share, when no one's afraid of someone. So yeah, we're going to start the work to create good examples. Racism isn't something you can solve, right? It's something that you can work towards getting better at, you know?
Yeah, and I really think that, like, if we're trying to envision like a more positive outlook, I think, you know, to me, what I would like to see, which is definitely like a long term, is definitely more people like I just can't stop thinking about how segregated it is. Like, I think we need to make more, like, not make more people work in different areas, but it's like we need more white people farming and more Black people trading. Like, it just needs to balance out, like, at every aspect. Like, it just needs to be diverse at more aspects of the supply chain. And, like, of course, like, the producing regions will always be the producing regions, and we can't change like where people come from. But I just think that, like, we just need to have it just needs to be a little bit more even as far as what jobs people are doing. And until that happens, I think it's always going to be like a very intense power struggle, you know, and people never want to give up power. So I think that's kind of like where we're at, you know. It's just kind of like whether or not this old culture is going to age out or continue on is up to the people in it and the future, and the people that are learning now and how we address it now and moving into the future. But I think there needs to be equity throughout all areas of the supply chain.
But Alicia, let me ask, didn't some white farmers just sell some coffee in Panama not long ago?
Yeah, I mean, and I don't mean Panama, because like we all know that's kind of, I mean, if you have a lot of money, you can buy land in Panama. So,
right. All right. I'm just saying.
I mean, I do
can sell at a higher price.
If we didn't just think of like coffee farmer, Black and brown person, it might actually change, you know, the dynamic when, you know, a Black or brown person goes to sell coffee to only a white person, or vice versa. Like, I think if we just had more, you know, diversity and like actual diversity throughout the supply chain, and not have it change completely different cultures as soon as it changed hands, then I think people would be a little bit more appreciative of it, and there wouldn't be this erasure, as we were talking, or, you know, or just kind of just not acknowledging a lot of coffee's origins. But, you know, I might see it in my career working in coffee, but that's not going to make me stop working in coffee, or at least trying to. You know, I don't know.
Yeah. One of the CCR board members said something I really could appreciate it. He said, you know, I've done a lot of things. I've done a lot of jobs. The only thing I can't stop doing is coffee. And I thought, wow, that's pretty cool.
It's, yeah, once you're in it, if you really want to be in it, it's really hard to walk away from easily. At least I've found that. At least, you know, even after getting laid off, I was just like, oh, well, who knows if I'll go back into coffee, but who am I kidding?
Here to stay. Well, I cannot thank you both enough for being here with us today, and for being vulnerable and being impassioned and sharing your perspectives and your experiences with us. Phyllis, for future reference, you're always welcome to go off script and get fiery with us. I think this has been a really beautiful conversation. And I wish that we could stay here all evening and continue this dialogue. But I think that this is just the beginning or the continuation of the conversation, and really look forward to continuing to be in touch with both of you from the Coffee Equity Lab, and to being in touch with all of you who have engaged in the chat. We do have one more coffee talk this semester, which is on November 5th. And we're going to be talking about coffee's interdisciplinary intersections. We'll have VU faculty on board, somebody from the medical center, somebody from African American and Diaspora Studies, somebody from French and the Robert Penn Warren Center for the Humanities, and then someone from Earth and Environmental Sciences. And we'd love for all of you all to join us. We'll send information about that. But for now, this has been such a wonderful conversation, and I cannot thank you all enough. And I know that goes the same for everyone that's on this call. So I hope that everyone here enjoys their evening, leaves feeling compelled and inspired and motivated to get out there and have difficult conversations and be vulnerable and get uncomfortable. It's really time for all of us to start getting uncomfortable and really start acting on behalf of racial equity and justice in this industry. So Phyllis and Alicia, thank you so much for the work that you're doing on this front. I'm inspired by both of you and can't wait to keep working alongside of both of you.
Same.
Thank you so much. I'm glad I was able to participate in this. This program seems really amazing, and looking forward to cupping with the students who are probably on here still in a couple weeks. So I haven't done I've led plenty of cuppings, but I haven't done one in a while. So that's really exciting for me to do one virtually and just get back into what I didn't really talk about, my sensory analysis stuff, but we can talk about more in a couple weeks.
We'll just schedule another one for that.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much. I'm going to end the meeting now. We look forward to talking soon and seeing all of you again soon.